On my 18th birthday, I didn't get a gift. I got 10 minutes to pack my bags. My stepmother slammed a legal waiver on the table and snarled, "Sign away your inheritance or rot on the street." My own father wouldn't even look at me as I was kicked out into the freezing night. They thought they'd won, but they didn't know a stranger was recording their every move. Stay tuned, because you won't believe the look on my father's face when he ended up on his knees, begging me for mercy. My name is Clara Vance. The night I turned 18, I blew out the candles on a dry, store-bought cake while my stepmother slammed a heavy stack of legal documents onto the dining table of our Memphis home. "Sign this right now, or you're out on the street for good," Eleanor snapped, her manicured finger jabbing at a faded copy of a trust agreement. "This $1.5 million was never meant for a girl like you. That money belongs to this family." My father, David, simply stared at his folded hands, refusing to meet my eyes. My stepbrother, Julian, leaned back in his chair with a smirk that suggested he'd already spent his share of the inheritance. I didn't sign. 10 minutes later, I was standing on the sidewalk with nothing but a single backpack. A biting wind sliced through my thin hoodie, and the heavy thud of the deadbolt echoed behind me. I walked the same path I had traveled for months, heading toward the familiar shadows of the downtown district. There on a dark corner, sat an elderly woman wrapped in a tattered wool coat. She sat motionless on a sheet of flattened cardboard, a rusted tin cup resting before her. Just like every other night, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my last $5 bill, and dropped it in. This time, however, her thin, weathered fingers clamped around my wrist with a strength that startled me. She pulled me close, her eyes wide and urgent. "Listen to me, child," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "Tonight, you do not sleep in the park. Not on the street, not anywhere they expect to find you. Find a motel, pay in cash, and lock the door. Tomorrow morning, come back here. I have something that will change everything." I stood there trembling on the dark Memphis pavement, digging through my bag for the remains of my savings. $127, every cent I had earned scrubbing floors at a local cafe over the summer. The temperature was plummeting, the frost settling on the pavement like shattered glass. I walked east until the flickering neon of the Blue Jay Inn caught my eye. The clerk didn't even look up from his screen, as I pushed $40 across the scratched laminate counter. No ID, no questions asked. Room 12 smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial bleach, but the bolt was sturdy and the window was locked. I kept my boots on and curled up under a threadbare blanket, still wearing my coat, and cried until my eyes burned. The next morning, I returned to the corner. Mrs. Martha was already there, huddled against the brick wall. I crouched down beside her. "You knew, didn't you? You knew they were coming for me." She studied me for a long beat. "My name is Martha Thorne. I've been watching the vultures circle that house of yours, Clara. They want you gone, and they want it badly." I told her everything, the trust, the way Eleanor kept waving those papers, her obsession with the idea that the money would revert to my father if I didn't claim it. Martha listened in silence, nodding as if she had seen this play out 1,000 times before. That afternoon, I walked into a 24-hour gas station near the edge of the city and practically begged the manager for work. He handed me an apron on the spot, overnight shifts, $10 an hour, under the table. I wouldn't see a real paycheck for 2 weeks, but it was a start. My life settled into a grueling rhythm. I clocked in at 11, mopped floors, stocked heavy crates, and rang up truckers and night owls until dawn. I survived on instant noodles and the day-old pastries marked for disposal. After every shift, I tucked away $5 or $10, and when the sun rose, I walked to the corner and dropped it into Martha's cup. She never asked where it came from, she just pressed my cold hands between hers and whispered her thanks. Some nights a sharp, chemical odor drifted through the air from the direction of the park, a heavy, suffocating scent like a fuel spill. I tried to convince myself it was just the fumes from the station, too exhausted to look for a deeper meaning. Then came the morning after I'd pulled a double shift. I took my usual shortcut through the park, but I stopped dead at the tree lean. Bright yellow police tape blocked every entrance. The fire engines had already left, but the stench of gasoline and melted plastic was thick enough to taste. The wooden benches where I used to rest when the motel money ran low were nothing but blackened, twisted skeletons. The exact corner where I used to hide my spare gear under a tarp was a pile of gray ash. I saw 2 investigators kneeling in the grass, carefully placing a scorched plastic bottle into an evidence bag. A charred rag was still jammed into its neck. "We've got 2 distinct pour patterns and a clear footprint in the mud," one of them muttered to his partner. I stood there, my stomach turning over. Those benches had been my only safety net. Someone had gone to great lengths to ensure I had no place left to hide. I watched the red and blue lights flash against the charred ruins of the north end, the wind snapping the crime scene tape like a whip. The air felt heavy with the realization that the threat wasn't just a threat anymore, it was an execution attempt. The air was thick with the acrid taste of gasoline and scorched plastic. A battered silver sedan screeched to the curb, and Sarah Miller jumped out, her diner apron flapping in the wind. Her eyes were wide with panic. "Clara. I've been driving these streets every morning looking for you," she cried, reaching for me. I took a sharp step back, my heart still racing. "I'm handling it, Sarah." "You call this handling it?" She gestured wildly at the blackened ruins of the park. "Get in the car. You're coming home with me right now." I shook my head, my jaw set. "I can't pull you into this. I don't even know what this is yet." She opened her mouth to protest, but I was already walking away, disappearing into the gray morning light. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, wiping down counters and restocking shelves until my skin smelled of citrus cleaner and exhaustion. As soon as my shift ended, I went straight to the corner. Martha was there, her coat pulled tight against the sharpening cold. I crouched beside her. "You knew something was coming the night they threw me out, didn't you?" She patted the edge of her cardboard mat. "Sit down, child." I sat. She kept her voice low, barely audible over the wind. 3 weeks ago, I noticed a boy circling this block almost every night. Expensive sneakers, a designer jacket, but he never dropped a single penny in a cup. He just watched you. He watched where you walked, and he watched you count your change. I've seen that look before. It's the look of someone measuring the distance to a grave. She reached deep into the layers of her clothing and pressed a tiny black USB drive into my palm, along with a scrap of paper. On it, 2 words were written in shaky, block letters: "Watch alone." "I bought a cheap solar camera at a pawn shop a while back," she whispered. "Mounted it high on the lamppost across the street. It's been running since the first night I saw him. Whatever is on that drive, you look at it by yourself first. Then you decide what needs to be done." I closed my fist around the plastic drive. "Why would you risk this for me, Martha?" "Because 20 years ago, my own son decided I was worth more dead than alive. Nobody stood up for me then. I'm too old to fight your battles, Clara, but I'm not too old to hand you the weapon." Back in room 12 of the Blue Jay Inn, I locked the door and dragged the heavy dresser in front of it. I plugged the drive into my battered laptop and opened the only file on it. It was night vision footage, time-stamped for nights ago. 2 figures moved into the frame, carrying red plastic jerrycans. The taller one set his down and pulled out a phone, tilting the screen toward the streetlight to read something. It was Julian. He was grinning, looking at the park as if the whole thing were a punchline to a joke. "We finished this before Friday," he said to his friend, his voice chillingly clear. "She signs at the bank next week, and then that money is locked away from us forever. After that, there are no second chances." His friend laughed, unscrewing a cap and splashing liquid across the very benches where I usually slept. Julian joined in, making sure the corner, where I hid my belongings, was completely soaked. He looked directly into his phone and muttered, "One less problem." Then he struck the match. I watched the clip 3 times, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought the neighbors would hear it. Every word was a confession. Every second was a death sentence. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling until my water cup slipped and shattered on the tile. The video was still looped on the screen. I dragged the progress bar back to the moment Julian tilted his phone. The text thread glowed brightly against his face. The name at the top of the screen read, Eleanor. The final message, sent less than 20 minutes before the fire started, was impossible to misread. The trust clause is clear. If she doesn't claim it before the signing date, every dollar rolls straight to your father. Do it fast and clean. No mistakes this time. I stared at the words until they blurred. They weren't just trying to scare me out of town. They genuinely believed that if I disappeared before the bank appointment, the inheritance would automatically become my father's. They were wrong about the law, but they were perfectly willing to murder me over that mistake. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. I fumbled for my phone and called the only person I had left. Sarah answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" "Room 12, I gasped. "Get here now. Don't stop for anything." She was at my door in 15 minutes, still wearing her work uniform. I moved the dresser, let her in, and hit play without saying a word. We watched the footage in a heavy, suffocating silence. When Julian's laugh echoed through the small room, Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. When Eleanor's text filled the screen, she gripped the edge of the mattress as if she might fall. "That's your brother," she whispered. "And that's your stepmother giving the order. They think killing me hands the money to my father on a silver platter," I said, my voice flat. "That's what the old copy of the will says. The one they stole from my grandfather's desk. They never saw the updated version." Sarah's eyes turned hard, the fear replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "We're taking this straight to the police tomorrow morning. No more running, Clara. This ends now." I barely slept that night. Every creak in the hallway sounded like a footstep, every shadow looked like a man with a match. At dawn, I slipped out and walked to the corner one last time. Martha was there, huddled in her faded coat. I crouched beside her. "You saved my life," I said. She shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not yet, child." But I recognized the look on that boy's face weeks ago. It was the same look my own son had the night he decided I was a burden. I wasn't going to let history repeat itself on my watch. "How did you know to set up the camera?" I asked, looking at the small device that held my future. Martha gave a tired, knowing smile. "I had a feeling the night you first told me about that trust. Greed makes people stupid, child, but more than that, it makes them predictable. I've been sleeping with one eye open for 20 years. I figured it was time that habit served someone other than myself." She pressed my hand once, her grip warm and steady. "You do what you have to do now. I'll be right here." The moment I stepped back into the motel room, Sarah grabbed my arm. Her face was set in a mask of determination. "We're leaving in 5 minutes. I already called out of the diner. This ends today." Sarah reversed out of the Blue Jay in parking lot before the sun had even cleared the rooftops. She drove straight to the Memphis Police Department's Central Station. We walked through the glass doors while the lobby was still half empty, the air smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. The desk sergeant took one look at my face and buzzed us through without a word. Detective Elias Reed met us in a small interview room. He was in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and calm, observant eyes. I placed the black USB drive on the table between us. "This is a video of my stepbrother pouring gasoline in the park where I've been sleeping," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My stepmother gave him the order." Reed inserted the drive into his laptop and hit play. The room fell silent, save for the sound of Julian's voice coming through the speakers, bragging about deadlines and inheritances. When Eleanor's text message lit up the screen, Reed paused the video. He leaned in, reading the words twice, then looked up at me. "You have the trust document." I slid the folded copy across the table, the same pages Eleanor had used to threaten me. He scanned the clauses, his gaze lingering on the section about funds reverting to my father. He nodded once. "Sit tight." They kept us there for most of the day. A technician confirmed the footage hadn't been tampered with, and that the metadata was intact. Within 2 hours, they had identified Julian's friend from the video. The boy lawyered up immediately, but he cracked enough to give a statement admitting he'd been paid $200 to help teach someone a lesson. By late afternoon, Detective Reed returned. "We have enough for a warrant. Attempted aggravated arson carries a heavy sentence in this state. We're picking him up tonight." Sarah drove me to her apartment so I wouldn't have to be alone. At nearly 1 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was Reed. "Julian Vance is in custody," he said. "Our units hit the house in Belle Meade 20 minutes ago. He tried to run out the back, but we had the perimeter covered. He isn't talking yet, but the evidence is airtight." "And Eleanor?" I asked. "She arrived 10 minutes after the arrest, screaming that it was all a mistake. She already had a criminal defense firm on speed dial. The judge granted bail but with strict conditions, an ankle monitor, a no-contact order, and she had to surrender her passport. She's back at the house now, but that bracelet will alert us if she gets within 500 feet of you." I crashed on Sarah's couch that night, but peace was a long way off. The next morning, as I left for my shift at the gas station, I noticed a dark sedan idling across the street. It was there again the next night, shadowing Sarah's car as we drove home. Eleanor might have been wearing an ankle monitor, but she still believed the money would end up with my father if she could just get to me. She wasn't finished. Friday morning, the trust officer from the bank downtown called while I was wiping down the counters. "Miss Vance, the final paperwork is ready. Bring 2 forms of ID and come in today. Once you sign the acceptance documents, the entire $1.5 million will be transferred immediately into a private account in your name only. No co-signers, no overrides." I told my manager it was a family emergency and clocked out early. Sarah picked me up, and we drove to the city center in a heavy silence. The bank lobby was cool and cavernous, the sound of my sneakers echoing against the marble floors. In a private office with thick carpets and a heavy oak desk, the officer walked me through the fine print, tax forms, beneficiary designations, and fraud protections. She slid the final signature sheet across the desk. "This is it, Clara. After this line, no one can touch the principal without your written consent. Ever." I signed Clara Vance in black ink. My hand was steady for the first time in weeks. When the scanner beeped its confirmation, the officer smiled. "Congratulations. You are now a very wealthy young woman." We walked out into the blinding noon sunlight. My new debit card felt heavy in my pocket, a strange weight that didn't seem to belong to me. My phone started ringing before we even reached the car. It was an unknown Memphis number. Then a text followed. "We need to talk as a family," the message read. "I can explain everything. Please, Clara, meet me." I didn't reply. I simply blocked the number. Detective Reed called an hour later while Sarah was driving us to grab some lunch. "Your stepmother just tripped her perimeter alert 3 separate times," he said. "She hired a private investigator out of Nashville. The same guy's been sitting in the gas station lot and outside Sarah's apartment since yesterday. We've caught him on traffic cams switching vehicles to avoid being spotted. My officers are bringing him in for questioning now." I thanked him and hung up, my fingers feeling like ice despite the afternoon heat. That night, I worked the closing shift alone. At 11:03 p.m., the last customer left, and I locked the front doors, counted the drawer, and killed the neon sign. The back parking lot was nearly empty, save for 2 semi-trucks idling under the floodlights. I had my keys out, heading for Sarah's car, when a black SUV rolled in fast and cut me off. The driver's window slid down. A man in a dark windbreaker leaned out, his face obscured by shadows, and extended a phone toward me without a word. Eleanor's voice came through the speaker, low and venomous. "Drop every charge, Clara. Sign the money over to your father like the trust intended, and this all goes away. Keep pushing, and next time there won't be a warning." I backed up until my spine hit the cold cinderblock wall of the station. The man kept the phone steady, waiting for a reaction. I pulled my own cell from my apron, hit the speed dial button Reed had programmed in, and switched it to speaker so the man could hear every word. "Detective, I'm in the east lot of the station on Union. Black SUV, Tennessee plates, Tango 49er. Your messenger is delivering a threat for Eleanor Vance right now." Reed's voice cut in, instantly sharp and commanding. "Stay exactly where you are. Units are 90 seconds out." The SUV's engine roared. Tires smoked as the driver slammed it into reverse, clipped a dumpster, and disappeared toward the highway on-ramp. I stood under the buzzing halogen lights, my pulse hammering in my ears, knowing the fight had just reached a new, dangerous level. Sirens split the night before the SUV even reached the ramp. 3 unmarked sedans and 2 patrol units boxed it in at the interchange. The driver tried to jump the median, but an officer tackled him face first onto the asphalt before he cleared 10 yards. Inside the vehicle, they found the burner phone, still warm from Eleanor's call. They also found a printed map with the gas station circled in red marker, and an envelope containing $5,000 in cash, banded with a rubber band and a handwritten note, "Final warning. No mistakes." Sarah and I reached the station just after 2 in the morning to give formal statements. By the time the sun came up, the hired driver had already signed a full confession. He had been contacted by my stepmother 2 days earlier, and instructed to put the fear of God into me to ensure I dropped the charges. He even handed over the original text thread where Eleanor spelled out exactly what he was supposed to say. The duty judge revoked her bail at 3:17 a.m. Officers rolled up to the house in Belmead before the streetlights went off. There was no high-priced lawyer to save her this time. Eleanor was processed in an orange jumpsuit and taken straight to the county jail. The prosecutor added felony witness tampering and criminal threats to the existing charges. By noon, every joint account she shared with my father was frozen. A lien was placed on the property that same afternoon. 36 hours later, David Vance showed up at the Blue Jay Inn. He looked like he hadn't slept since the arrest, his shirt was untucked, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands shook as he stood in the lobby doorway. The night clerk buzzed my room. I almost told him to send my father away, but instead, I walked down. He dropped to his knees the second he saw me, right there on the worn carpet between the ice machine and the vending machines. "Clara, please," he choked out, his voice raw. "Drop the charges. Eleanor and Julian, they got carried away, but they're still your family. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I just wanted us all to stay together like we were before." I stared down at him, feeling a strange, hollow coldness. "You stood silent the night she threw me out with nothing," I said, my voice flat. "You read the same copy of the trust she did. You let them believe that if I disappeared, the money would come to you." "I thought we could fix it," he whispered, tears cutting tracks through the stubble on his cheeks. "I never believed they'd actually." "You never stopped them, either." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "You all read one paragraph of that trust and built your whole plan around it," I said. "You were wrong from the very first day, and now it's too late." Security appeared behind him. 2 officers took his arms and lifted him gently to his feet. He didn't fight them, he just kept repeating my name as they walked him out. I watched through the glass doors as he sat in his pickup for nearly half an hour, his forehead pressed against the steering wheel, before finally driving away. He didn't resist. He just kept repeating my name under his breath as the guards led him away. I watched through the glass doors as he sat in his pickup for nearly half an hour, his forehead pressed against the steering wheel, before he finally pulled out of the lot and disappeared into the city traffic. Several months later, I stood outside the main courtroom of the Shelby County Courthouse. My hands were buried in the pockets of a new wool coat, one that actually kept the damp Tennessee wind at bay. Inside, the gallery was almost empty, save for a few local reporters and Sarah, who sat faithfully by my side. The judge read the verdicts in a calm, measured tone. Eleanor Vance was sentenced to 7 years for felony witness tampering, criminal threats, and conspiracy to commit aggravated arson. Julian was ordered to 5 years in a juvenile detention facility, with an automatic transfer to an adult prison once he turned 21. The house in Belmead was sold at a sheriff's auction within weeks. My father lost everything, eventually moving into a cramped one-bedroom apartment near the river. He spent his days driving that same old pickup to various dead-end jobs, barely earning enough to cover the rent. I used a portion of the trust to move Martha Thorne into Magnolia Estates, the premier assisted living community on the outskirts of the city. She now has a private suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and fresh flowers delivered every Monday. She gets 3 chef-prepared meals a day. The first time she walked down the garden path wearing real leather shoes instead of the plastic bags she used to wrap around her feet, she wept so hard the nurses thought she was in pain. Sarah moved into the spare bedroom of the small cottage I bought in the Cooper Young district. She quit the diner and enrolled as a full-time student at the University of Memphis, supported by a scholarship I established in her name. Together we painted the walls in warm, bright hues, colors that held no memory of motel rooms or jail cells. On the final day of the legal proceedings, the attorney for the estate took the stand to enter the official trust document into the public record. He read a specific clause my grandfather had quietly added when I was 16, a clause Eleanor and my father had never seen. Should Clara Vance pass away or otherwise fail to accept the trust principal prior to the designated signing date, the entire corpus shall transfer irrevocably to the Thomas Vance Memorial Fund for At-Risk Youth. No portion shall revert to David Vance or any other family member under any circumstance. Eleanor's face seemed to collapse. She stared at the document as if it were a physical blow. The courtroom remained silent, save for the soft, final thud of the judge's gavel. As the deputies led her out in handcuffs and leg irons, she stopped beside me, her eyes wild with a desperate kind of fury. "That money was supposed to be ours," she hissed, the words catching in her throat. I looked her straight in the eye, feeling nothing but a profound sense of pity. "You tried to murder me for a fortune that was never going to be yours anyway. You lost everything because of a greed you couldn't control. That is the price." I walked out into the Memphis sunlight and didn't look back. Sometimes the greatest kindness comes from a stranger when your own blood fails you. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who cause the deepest scars. But I've learned that a real family isn't something you're simply born into, it's something you choose, and something that chooses you in return. Martha taught me that with a $5 bill and a whispered warning. Sarah proves it to me every single day. And I finally understand that no amount of money is worth the weight of a compromised soul. Kindness will always find its way back to you, even when the rest of the world falls apart.